Man, thanks so much for being here today. It's my pleasure to be the pastor of this church where so many of you want to see what God's going to do in your life, and then you get out there and do it. And so I want to talk to you today about something very important. It's happening all over the place, and you may not even know that it's happening, and it's called identity theft. How many of you guys have been victims of identity theft? Anybody? You have. It's pretty crazy, isn't it? And it can happen, and you don't even know that it's happened, right? I mean, people can steal your whole identity. They can mess with you in ways that are just unbelievable. So how many of you guys have protection from identity theft these days? You got some kind of, especially after Equifax, which is supposed to be like in charge of our credit score, right? And then they have a breach where like the password on somebody's computer that's really high up is like the password is password, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, really? Are you kidding me? You're an IT person and your password is password? That's not even right. And then many of us, including me, I still have to deal with this. Julie, help me remember. We got to deal with this. But Equifax, got some of our stuff out there into the cyberspace. So you could be a victim of identity theft at any moment. And this is what I'm going to contend with you, that every single one of you are a victim of identity theft. Yes, you. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are a victim of identity theft. Go ahead and turn to them and tell them. Tell them. Because they are. They're a victim of identity theft, and I'm going to prove it today. I'm going to show you what happens with identity theft. This is a big deal. We got to overcome identity theft, because if you don't, if your identity remains hidden and you don't figure out what your identity is, then you lose and the world loses, and we got to fix it. So here we go. Last Sunday afternoon, Jonathan Smith headed to a concert in Las Vegas. When Jonathan Smith hit that concert, he was a copier machine repairman. By the end of the concert that night, John Smith, could there be a more common name? John Smith becomes a hero. John Smith, in the middle of that shooting spree, the horrific event in Las Vegas last Sunday night, John Smith reclaimed his identity. He wasn't just John Smith, copier machine repairman. He was John Smith, hero. He's credited with saving over 30 people's lives. Can you imagine that? You arrive at a concert and you think you're just going to watch a show and you think you're just going to enjoy the night. And before the night's out, you're helping people find cover from gunshots coming from God knows where. And what's happening in the middle of that, Jonathan Smith claimed his identity not just as a copier machine repairman, not just a 30-year-old who lives in California, but as a 30-year-old copier machine repairman who becomes a hero who saves over 30 people's lives. Pretty crazy, right? Because your real identity isn't revealed until there's a crisis. Who you really are doesn't really show up until there's a moment when God needs you to step up and step out and become who you might be. Some of you have let the enemy shout you down. Some of you have not only become victims of identity theft, but you're willing victims now because you know that there's something more inside of you, and you chose not to live up to it. Jonathan Smith had a choice, didn't he? At that moment when he begins to realize what's happening, he had a choice to help people or just run for cover by himself, right? In the middle of helping those 30 people, Jonathan Smith got shot twice, once in the shoulder, once in the neck, and he's beginning to bleed pretty profusely, and then there's a police officer who's at that same concert from San Diego named Tom McGrath. And Tom McGrath shows up and begins to push Jonathan to safety and helps Jonathan by actually taking his fingers and placing them in one of the gunshot wounds in his neck that was bleeding out and staunching the blood flow. So a hero saves a hero. It's a magnificent story of reclaiming your identity. Tom McGrath helps John Smith into the back of a pickup truck where another wounded person is, and they're whisked off to the hospital to be taken care of. Friends, if you don't reclaim your identity, a lot of people are going to lose their lives. If you don't step up and become who you might be, the world is at stake. Did you know that the world is waiting for you to be who you might be? I love hero movies. Many of you love hero movies. And I love those things. One of the greatest things I think that's happened recently is there are some movies like the Wonder Woman movie that came out not too long ago. How many of you guys seen that one? I think it's good. It's good because it says to young ladies what needs to be said. Heroes aren't just men. Heroes are young ladies, too. They're people of all colors and stripes and types. So it's not about age, and it's not about color, and it's not about gender. It's about what's in your heart. And so I love it when people like John Smith show up. I'm very sorry for what happened in Las Vegas. And the enemy is always seeking to steal and to kill and to destroy, to take your identity away. John 10:10, Jesus said this. He said, "The thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. But I've come that they may have life and have it abundantly." You see, there's a thief who wants to take your identity and who wants to stop you from being who you might be. If the thief can stop you from being the hero that you're meant to be, then the world loses and you lose and we lose. However, I'm on a quest as your pastor. I'm on a quest as a person. If I can help you figure out who you really are and what God really put in you, no matter what your age is, no matter what your gender, if I can help you see who God put in you, what He's made you to do, and who He's called you to be, and you can hit the battlefield and do what you're called to do, the whole world is better, and you get better too. Isn't that cool? That's the mission. That's really my mission. Is just boil it down, man. My mission is to get you on your mission, and if I can unlock you and get you unleashed and unchained and out there doing what you're born to do, what you're called to do, then everybody wins. Because the enemy has a plan, and his plan is to destroy you, is to squelch your identity, to make John Smith believe he's just a copier machine repairman. When the bullets start to fly, if the enemy could just get him and say, no, you're not a hero. Don't save those people. Just run for recover yourself. You're just a copier machine repairman, dude. You're only 30. Just get under the car yourself. Don't worry about anybody else. Right? So if the enemy could have won at that moment, if the enemy who had the mind, who'd taken control of a gunman at the Mandalay Bay Hotel 30 stories up, if that honestly, friends, is just evil. It's just pure evil. The person controlled there is controlled by the enemy of life, and he's the one that comes to steal our identity. And it couldn't be more true for you and for me. Your identity is at risk. You are at risk. The world is at risk, because if the enemy can shut you down, then he wins. But if Christ can set you free, then his kingdom advances and people are saved. And that's what we want. That's what we want. So I want to take you into a story that helps you understand how this works. Before I take you into the story, I'm going to give you a pattern for how to live into the hero you were meant to be. Here's the pattern. Here's how we do it. And then I'm going to give you a biblical example from the Old Testament, a story that you're very familiar with. But we're going to unpack the story in a way that I think is going to give you power to leave here to be the person you know you were meant to be. So we got to stop the enemy's efforts to destroy your identity, and here's how it works. It comes from Romans 12:1 and 2. This was a letter that was written to a church in Rome about how to live as a Christ follower. There's a lot of text on the screen. You may not be able to read it all, so just listen carefully. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. You see, that's what worship is. It's to come before God and to offer your life up to Him as an offering all the time. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Don't believe for a moment that you're just John Smith, copier machine repairman, that you're just X, I'm just this. You're more than you think you are. By God's help and with His Spirit in you, you're more than you think you are. You're more ready than you think you are. But in the moments, in the ordinary moments of your life, never forget that God may be ready to do something amazing in your life. But don't become well adjusted to your culture that you get squeezed down into a mold without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. John Smith, copier machine repairman, in the middle of a concert, responds instantly. Bam, bam, bam. As fast as the bullets are coming, he's taking action. And sometime in your life, there's going to be a moment when you need to take action. In spite of your fear, in spite of who you think you are, in spite of the little image you have of yourself, God may call you into the game and may encourage you, inspire you to take action. Please don't let your feelings overwhelm you at that moment. Be in charge of those feelings and get moving on what God has called you to do right then, right there, because the world is waiting on you to take your place and to do your thing. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-formed maturity in you. See, God's will for you is for you to become a mature follower of Jesus Christ. And to be a mature follower of Jesus Christ is to be empowered by the Holy Spirit, and is to become a person who's bold and not fearful, a person who looks after the needs of others and not just themselves, a person who loves like crazy, because there's no greater love than to give your life for somebody else, right? And John Smith, copier machine repairsman, 30-year-old from California, risked everything to save some other people. It may not be that dramatic in your life. It might be that tomorrow morning you head off to work and it's a pretty ordinary day. But in your ordinary day, look around for who needs you. Look around for who needs a touch, a word from you. Check out your Facebook posts and see who needs a word from you. A lot of people discouraged, and a lot of times they post on there. How can you help? What can you do? What would it look like for you to be the person God called you to be, to help other people, not just to focus on yourself? You see, the enemy has a battle plan to steal your identity, to take it away from you, and to keep you from being who you could be. And it shows up so incredibly clear in a very familiar story. I'm hesitant to tell you the name of the story because you will check out mentally. Okay, how many of you guys promise me you won't check out once I tell you the name of the story? Raise your hands high. Say, Jeff. Say it, Jeff. I will not check out. Some of you did not raise your hands, so we're going to start the sermon all over again. So we have a problem today, and it's called identity theft. And, okay, anyway, here's the deal: is you got to hang with me here. So you promise to stay with me, okay? The story is the story of David and Goliath. Now I told you, you're going to think, I know the story. No, you don't. You don't know this. You don't know this part of the story. So hang on with me here. I'll give you some of the familiar, and this is from 1 Samuel 17. This is your homework to go study this chapter this week. 1 Samuel 17, you go study it, but don't try to read with me right now. I'm going to skip through the text. You won't be able to, and I can't tell you where I'm going because I'm going to just preach through it, okay? And you will be as surprised as I am about some of what comes out. So you know that there's two armies. There's an Israel army, and an army of the Israelites, and there's an army of the Philistines. And the Philistines have a giant called Goliath, and this giant is huge, measuring over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet and a coat of mail, like chainmail, that weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leggings, and he slung a bronze javelin over his back. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam. He tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. An armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a huge shield. Okay, so let me put this to scale for you. His spear was so big that the tip of the spear, the iron tip of the spear, weighed about the same amount as 2-gallon milk jugs at the end of the spear. Can you imagine that? The ability to handle that and to throw that with 2-gallon milk jugs hanging on the end of it out here. Now, that's a pretty big enemy. 9 feet tall, the best I can guess, and Robbie made this cross for us. That's a 12 feet tall cross. Robbie, do you remember? Is it 12 feet? Is that right? The cross beam, would that be about 9 feet? About? Okay. Imagine a man as big as the cross beam of the cross here, with a spear with the tip of it that weighs the same as 2-gallon milk jugs, just plus a little bit. Now, that's a massive amount of humanity. That's a big human. In addition to that, he has a shield bearer that's probably somebody at least my size, or maybe the size of Gary, who was singing over here a while ago, who's also a rather large human being, with a big shield. And that's what you're looking at. And this giant comes down in the valley every day. And he's mocking the army of God. And every day he challenges them, and the challenge is the same. This goes on for 40 days. He comes out every day, And Stevie looks up there, it'd be like the Kentucky State Police. He's a state policeman all lined up on one side, and some little posse, dirtbag militia from southeastern Kentucky, where I'm from, on the other. But we send some giant down in the crowd, and we start mocking the state police. We start saying, yeah, y'all send somebody down here to fight me if y'all ain't a bunch of sissies. He does it for 40 days. That'd make you mad, wouldn't it? Stephen would be like, "Oorah, I'm in there. He's kid coming down to get me." So it'd be all on me, you know. But the deal is that there is this enemy that taunts you. Listen to me. Let me tell you who your enemy is. Your enemy is inside of you. Your enemy is your emotions of fear and doubt. Your enemy is lodged inside your own heart. Your enemy appears so huge, so big, and he mocks you, and he challenges you. And he wants to destroy your identity. He wants to take you out of the game. And for 40 days, this giant keeps an entire army at bay. King Saul wouldn't fight him. None of the men would fight him. He keeps shouting at them. And he keeps taunting them. And he keeps them frozen in fear. And today, listen to me, some of you, you are frozen dead in your tracks. You are so fearful. You're so afraid. You're not moving. You believe what your feelings are telling you, and your feelings are false. They are not true. I know in this series of emotionally healthy spirituality, we're talking about acknowledging your feelings. I got to say to you, sometimes you need to do with your feelings what I'm going to teach you to do here in this passage, and that is to look at them, acknowledge them. Yes, those are big feelings. Yes, they make me feel a certain way. But in this case, you got to get things in order. And you got to speak back to the feelings. And I'm going to teach you what to do with those feelings that seem so big. One day, Jesse said to David, shepherd David, his son, "Take this half bushel of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers, and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See how your brothers are getting along, and bring me back a letter from them." See, he's sending David to the front lines where the army's camped out, where David's older brothers are. David's 3 oldest brothers are in this army, and for 40 days they're hearing the same taunt every day from this giant. David's brothers were with Saul and the Israelite army at the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts. He arrived at the outskirts of the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with shouts and battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. David left, David left these things with the keeper of supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with them, he saw Goliath, the champion from Gath, come out from the Philistine ranks, shouting his challenge to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. "Have you seen the giant?" the men were asking. "He comes out each day to challenge Israel. And have you heard about the huge reward the king has offered to anyone who kills him? The king will give him one of his daughters for a wife." And apparently she's smoking hot. "And his whole family will be exempted from paying taxes." What? The whole family gets exempted from taxes? Now that's worth fighting for, right? I mean, David, this has gone deaf to the rest of the army. They've forgotten this. But David's hearing this for the first time. David talked to some of the others standing there to verify the report. He said, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and putting an end to his abuse of Israel?" And then they answered him again. He said, "Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he should defy the armies of the God?" And David received the same reply as before. "What you have been hearing is true. That is the reward for killing the giant. You get the king's daughter, and there's no more taxes." But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. "What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and dishonesty. You just want to see the battle. David asked back, so what have I done now? I was only asking a question. He walked over to some of the others and asked them again. He wanted to make sure this is really true. Is this really what's going to happen? Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. You see, David shows up, and he wonders, well, what's up with the giant, and why are you all just standing here? I mean, so you're going to get the king's daughter. There's no more taxes, so what's the problem? Let's get this going on. Let's fight this battle. Who's going down there? And so who steps up, though, and who's angry with David? Who was it? His oldest brother. Now, you may begin to notice a pattern in Scripture, if you study long enough, that sometimes God sends the weakest, youngest to fight the biggest battle. And some of you feel like you're the weakest. You feel like you're the youngest. You feel like you're the most unlikely. You feel like, I'm just a copier, machine repairman, dude. I'm just young. You can make up whatever imagination in your own mind about who you are that you want, but you're not right. You're not just a copier, machine repairsman. David, you're not just a shepherd of a few sheep. There's something more. And here's how you know. Listen to me now. This is for one or two of you. You know in your heart that you are called for more. You know that God has called you for more. You may be the only one who knows, but you know. You must make a choice today. Whose voice will you listen to? Who will you hear? Which voice wins in your heart? You choose. Don't expect the people that know you best to believe in you. Some of you are waiting for somebody in your family or some authority figure around you to step up and to knight you as the anointed one. It ain't gonna happen. As a matter of fact, the people that know you best probably think the least of you. They probably don't see what's really in you. They probably can't imagine what you might be able to do. John Smith, copier machine repairman, last Sunday night, he heads off to the concert. His mom and brothers, I don't know if he has brothers or not, but whoever's closest to him, you know what they think about John Smith? You know who they think he is? He's John Smith, 30-year-old copier machine repairman who lives in Southern California. That's who John Smith is. That's all they see him as. But if you go watch the CNN reports from this past week, you'll see Jonathan Smith is more than a 30-year-old copier machine repairman, and you're more than you think you are unless you let your identity be stolen by the enemy, unless you let those closest to you shout you down and keep you down. So David is brought before King Saul, and this is what David says to him. Don't worry about a thing. I'll go fight this Philistine. Heck, your daughter's hot, and we no more taxes. This is good. We'll go do this. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can go against the Philistine. You're only a boy, and he's been in the army since he was a boy. Okay, so his brother is against him. Who else is against him? The king's against him. Like, you can't do this. It's identity theft. It's happening all the time. What authority in your life is telling you you can't do this? Who is it? What is it? What voice are you listening to? What authority is stepping up and telling you can't do this? You're just a X. You're just a copier machine repairman. You're just a hairdresser. You're just a mechanic. You're washed up. You're too old. You've already had a career. You're retired. You're done. What voice are you listening to? What are they saying to you? You're just a 14-year-old girl. What good can you do? It's probably going to be somebody in your family, probably going to be an authority figure who doesn't see in you what God sees in you. This is important. David speaks back to the authority, but David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club, and I take the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw, and I club it to death. It's a pretty slick move right there, right? I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do this to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. You see, David shows up from outside. He's the only one that has a clear picture of what's going on. The rest of the army has gone blind to it. They're all victims of identity theft, and they're just sitting back and taking it. Rarely is the majority right when it comes to taking on giants. Most of the time it takes an outsider. Most of the time it takes an unlikely one. Most of the time it takes someone who doesn't think they can. They think they're just a copier machine repairman. They think they're just a girl in high school. They think they're just XYZ. They've labeled themselves and they think, I'm just this. You're not just that. You're more. But here's what's important to note. When David was just a shepherd, he was faithful in doing what he was called to do. So friends, wherever you are, whatever your station is right now, be faithful where you are. Do the most you can every single day. Every time you go out to do your work, to go to school, to play on that athletic field, every day you go out, you bring your A game every single time so that when it comes time for you to step up, you're ready to go. Does this make sense? You can't be a slacker every other day and then show up and be the hero on the day when you're needed. You need to bring an A game every single time out of the chute. Bring everything you've got every time. Kill the lion, kill the bear, do what's right, take care of your sheep, whatever your sheep are, do your thing at an A level so that when it's your time to step up and do what's right, you can. Does this make sense? Are you with me? In the old-timey church, they'd say amen. Give me something. Give me something. Okay, help me. You see, here's the deal. This little David shows up from outside, and he shows up and he thinks he's just a shepherd, but God sees more. John Smith shows up, thinks I'm just a copier machine repairman. 30 people's lives are saved because he's more. How many lives are going to be saved because you're more than you think you are? But you've got to shout down the other voices. You've got to shut down the voice of the older brother. You've got to shut down the voice of the authorities who tell you you cannot. So Saul relents. He says, okay, here you go, take my armor. So he puts all of his armor on David. And Saul is a big man. He's an older man. He puts all this armor on David. And David's all weighted down. He's like, I can't even move in this stuff, dude. This is not going to work. And although Saul was trying to be helpful, it was not helpful. So David had to take all that stuff off, all that looked like it would protect him. It was actually going to destroy him. Here's the next thing that happens in identity theft. People around you who love you are going to try to tell you, you have to fight the battle my way. It would not have worked. You see, David's superpower is that he was great with a slingshot. He could take that slingshot as a shepherd, and he could take a rock, and he could hit a lion 100 yards away and drive it away from the sheep. He had practiced this in the fields over and over and over again. When he's bored and the sheep are just eating, he's got his sling out, and he's hitting the exit sign in the back of the room, bam, right on the eye every time. Bam, bam, bam. He blacks out the whole eye. E-X-I-T, takes out the whole eye. Bam, over and over again with his sling. So guess what David has to do to go to battle? Strip down, get back to who he is, own who he is from the inside out, fight the way he was designed to fight, and the way he was designed to fight, not with armor, but with a slingshot. Today, the equivalent of that would be an archer. Many of you guys have become enamored with archery ever since Mockingjay and all this stuff with that particular movie came out. A lot of people have taken up archery. Well, in those days, David was an archer in military terms, and he could take a sling and a rock, and he could hit you from 100, 200 yards, and he would hit you directly wherever he wanted to hit you every single time because he had practiced over and over and over and over again. Goliath's superpower is he's huge, but he's slow. David's superpower is he's small, and he's nimble, and he can hit you with a rock from a long way off. So although the spear that Goliath wielded, huge spear, 15-pound tip on that spear, 9 feet tall. The spear is probably 10, 12 feet long. On paper, there's no way this works out. Right? Look at me. Listen to me. You think there's no way you can win. I assure you, you can. You think there's no way that God could use you. I assure you, He can. You think you're too old. You think you're too young. You think you're just this or you're just that. I promise you, God sees more. I promise you. There's more. There's more in you than you know that is in you. It takes a moment where heroes need to rise for you to rise. It takes a moment when all the chips are down for you to become who you might become. But that means every day between now and then you bring your A game. It means every day you honor God by doing the best you can with what you have, so that when Goliath shows up and tries to shout you down, you don't do it. So far, David's been challenged by his brother, by the king. He's been offered different armor. He realizes, I've got to go out and fight my own way. So David took off Saul's armor. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them in his shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with a shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across to fight Goliath. Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him, sneering in contempt at the ruddy-faced boy. Am I a dog that you come at me with a stick? And he cursed David by the names of his God. And I can't tell you what he said because it doesn't say, but if I said it, you wouldn't like it, and you would say that I cussed in church, and you'd be all mad. So anyway, he cussed at him. Come over here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals, Goliath yelled at him. Listen to him. Listen now. Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen. Listen. You are listening to the voices in your head that are shouting at you and telling you that you're worthless. You are listening to the voices in your head that are cursing at you and telling you that you can't do this and that you're just a copier, machine repairman. To be emotionally healthy, you must understand when those voices are real and from God and when they are from Satan. The thief comes to steal and to kill and destroy. And the moment there's a lid that's placed on you, believe it, most of the time, 99.5% of the time, that voice is from Satan. That's saying, you're just to this, you're just to that. David gets this right. And this is what you got to do back to your emotions sometimes. David shouted in reply, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. You look so impressive. You're so big, you big bully. But I come to you. This is important. I come to you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you, and I will cut off your head. Today I will kill you, and I'll cut off your head. Some of you guys need to say it back to your feelings right now. Because you got feelings that are letting control you, and they're telling you you're just to this, you're just to that. You've got some echo of a voice from an authority or a parent or an older brother or sister who told you you're just to this, you're just to that. You need to shout back at that voice and tell them, today, I'm going to cut your head off, dude. Go ahead and say it. Today, I'm going to cut your head off. Go ahead and say it. Today, I'm going to cut your head off. Today, I'm going to cut your head. I'm going to cut the head off of this feeling. I'm going to cut the head off of this lousy, stinking feeling, this script that was handed to me by somebody else. Today, I'm cutting your head off. Yeah, you say what you want to me. You try to make me feel a certain way. I'm not going to be ruled by my feelings anymore. I'm going to speak back to my feelings. I'm going to preach back to my feelings. I'm going to get back in charge of my feelings. I'm going to live by facts and faith, and then feelings are coming to you. Yes, I acknowledge my feelings, but you march your feelings in front of the throne of Christ, and you ask Him, Jesus Christ, is this a feeling, a thought I should have and harbor and grow, or is this a feeling I should get rid of? When the bullets start to fly, when the people around you need a hero to rise, will you rise? Will you rise? It's all about which voices you listen to. It's all about which voice you let dominate you. It's all about whether you let this fictitious big character rule over you or not. You see, the reality is, as we learn more about Goliath, and you've heard that Goliath was more powerful, he's this, he's that. The reality is, if we look back with some scientific knowledge, chances are that Goliath, yes, he was huge, but chances are he was haunted by a disease called gigantism that made him huge. But it also made him probably very nearsighted where he couldn't see. That's why it looks like there's a dog coming at him with a stick in his mouth. And he's slow. The one with really the power was the shepherd that shows up with a sling, who's fought battles before, who trusts God with his whole heart. Will you trust God with your whole heart? Will you step into the fray today? Will you step out and be who you're called to be? Will you be ruled by your emotions? Emotions are good when you let them serve you. Emotions are not good when you serve them. Your emotions feel giant. They feel huge. They feel in charge. Speak back to the enemy. Speak back to your emotions. Preach back to them. Remind them you're going to cut their head off today. They're not going to have power over you anymore. They're not going to have grip over you anymore. You are going to be the person God has called you to be. That's my hope. That's my dream for you, that you take your place. When this church is filled with those of us who take our place as the champions God called us to be, the world gets changed. And that's God's plan for us.